Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Thank you for joining me today. I am speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish First Nations. I'm here today to provide an update on our government's work to transition away from open net pen salmon farming in coastal British Columbia, as stated in the minister's mandate letter from the Prime Minister. I'm providing this update with a sense of urgency that I think is shared by many British Columbians. We know that many wild Pacific salmon stocks are at critical levels. In fact, on the Fraser, they are at an all-time historic low. Wild salmon aren't just a significant economic driver in British Columbia, they are part of our cultural identity as a province. They feed and nourish our people, our land, and our whales. They are a core piece of biodiversity that we must not just work to protect, but work to restore their populations to traditional levels of abundance. Wild salmon represent a very real and tangible example of how the economy and the environment work hand in hand. We know that the foundation of a healthy and thriving economy must be based on the foundation of a healthy and thriving environment. This is why our government has taken significant and bold action on many issues related to biodiversity. As the Parliamentary Secretary for Fisheries and Oceans and as a Member of Parliament for Burnaby North Seymour, I've had the opportunity to work directly on many of these files, most of which have had direct impacts on wild salmon. This includes restoring protections and adding modern safeguards to the Fisheries Act, including restoration of the prohibitions against the harmful alteration, disruption, or destruction of fish habitat, amending the Oceans Act, and expanding Canada's marine protected areas. We took office in 2015. Despite having the world's longest coastline, we had only protected less than 1% of our marine habitat. We are now close to 14% and heading to 25% by 2025. We have invested significantly in increasing the capacity of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, including with regards to science and enforcement. And we have introduced Canada's Ocean Protection Plan, which has made real and significant investments throughout British Columbia. We are taking global leadership on climate change, including expanding on BC's leadership and implementing a national price on pollution and moving forward on exceeding our 2030 emission targets. And we have taken on single-use plastics. As many of you already know, if we don't continue to take action on plastics, it is estimated that plastic will outmass biodiversity in our world's oceans by 2050. And this is only a generation away, or just over a generation away. None of these issues were easy. They all required balancing the pressures of short-term economic growth with long-term environmental restoration and sustainability. While these issues can be difficult and certainly can require sacrifices in the near term, we know that the long-term success of our economy is completely reliant on the long-term success and health of our environment. I got into politics to make sure that my constituents, British Columbians and all Canadians, have pathways to success to ensure that our grandkids and their grandkids have better opportunities than we have today. It is with that framework in mind that I approach the policies I just previously discussed, and it is with that framework in mind that I think about wild salmon and the finfish aquaculture industry in British Columbia. When it comes to transitioning away from open net pen salmon farming in BC, we face similar economic and environmental challenges. Building a responsible path for the transition to a more sustainable future for the finfish aquaculture industry is going to be a significant undertaking, which will require collaboration between all levels of government, First Nations, industry, and other stakeholders. Today, more than 90% of our planet's wild fish stocks are being either fished to the legal maximum or overfished. Almost half of all fish consumed by people today comes from aquaculture. Canada's aquaculture sector represents a major area of economic development and growth. In 2018, it generated almost 25,000 full-time jobs for Canadians, mostly in coastal, rural, and Indigenous communities. Both in our economy and in our diet, aquaculture meets a clear and growing demand. As Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister, I am passionate about making our aquaculture sector as sustainable and viable as possible. It is a clear driver of the future of the blue economy and presents a significant economic opportunity for all Canadians. I am proud to serve with a minister and with a government that shares in that goal. We are developing an aquaculture industry that will help grow our middle class, strengthen environmental protections, and position Canada as a global leader in sustainability. Here in British Columbia, aquaculture is perfectly positioned to help drive economic growth. Over 2/3 of Canada's farm salmon production occurs here in BC. And as you know, many Canadians are concerned about the industry's environmental impacts, particularly its impact on our wild salmon. British Columbians have been clear. They want a robust and cautious approach to aquaculture. They also want a thriving wild salmon population that has in itself generated billions of dollars in value to Canada over our history as a nation. That is why Minister Jordan and DFO are exploring an area-based approach to managing aquaculture, an approach that takes into consideration unique environmental, social, and economic factors when identifying potential areas for sustainable aquaculture development and growth. Today, I am pleased to announce that the federal government is one step closer to transitioning open net pens in coastal British Columbia waters. As her parliamentary secretary and as a proud British Columbian, I have been tasked by Minister Jordan to take a lead role in the development of a responsible path to a more sustainable future for finfish aquaculture on the West Coast. I will be and have been engaging with First Nations, the aquaculture industry, and environmental stakeholders here in British Columbia on how we can do this effectively, responsibly, and sustainably. Everything we learn through this process, the concerns, the solutions, the possibilities, the opportunities, will be discussed and used as our guide for government's decisions. This ensures that the way forward is directly informed by the needs and wishes of our communities and therefore addresses those needs and those concerns head on. The plan is a massive undertaking. We will do it, but we could only do it well with a long-term plan in place, one that ensures that those employed by aquaculture and the wild salmon industry do not slip through the cracks. I want to emphasize that we're not just starting from scratch. We're building on a solid foundation of work that is already being worked on. In fact, I was first asked to look at this file in 2018 by then Minister Dominic LeBlanc. So while I am no means an expert on the file, I am better informed than many parliamentarians, and I look forward to improving my knowledge by working with experts throughout the province. In addition to my own background, the State of Salmon Aquaculture Technology Report provided a glimpse of the future and what is possible. I expect advancements in new aquaculture technology and the adoption of this new technology will play a large role going forward. We are also grateful for the work of the Senate Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, with the aspirational goal of doubling Canadian aquaculture production within the next decade. They have proposed a number of recommendations to help achieve this, all of which prioritize sustainability and environmental protections. There is an ongoing study on wild Pacific salmon at the Fisheries and Oceans Committee, and I am sure they will touch on finfish aquaculture as well, and I thank those members for their continued good work. I want to thank everyone in the aquaculture sector, as well as our Indigenous and coastal communities who are working or who will be working in partnership with our government on this. Minister Jordan is leading an effort to make aquaculture more sustainable for generations to come, and your input is going to be crucial. Finally, I can't stress enough how important the blue economy is to the future of British Columbia. Whether it's salmon, seaweed, or shellfish, the industry wants to grow in this province. That growth represents a massive opportunity, but it is an opportunity that can only reach its full potential if we support it in becoming not just sustainable, but state-of-the-art in terms of technology, research, and development. In conclusion, I want to thank Minister Jordan for the responsibility and this opportunity to make a meaningful contribution to the future of our beautiful province. I look forward to continuing to work with our partners to achieve clear and lasting solutions and to help grow a globally competitive, sustainable, and environmentally responsible aquaculture industry here in British Columbia. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I know it's sometimes more complicated with these virtual environments, given us having to deal with the pandemic, but I would be more than happy to take any questions that you have at this time.
Parliamentary Secretary Beech will be joined by our departmental expert, Allison Webb, Pacific Region Director, Aquaculture Management. Heina Alam with the Canadian Press. What exactly is area-based management approach? It's still out in the coastal waters. So what changes and what's the technology?
Well, thank you very much for that question. There's two parts to it. I'll start with the latter. There has been increased investments in more sustainable technology, including closed containment systems, hybrid systems. There was a report that came out by DNB, I think it was 2017, but it might be 2018, that talked about the growth of land-based systems. But I'm not even aware of what all the technology is that exists. Part of the exercise that we need to go through is understanding what state of the art looks like and how we can ensure that British Columbia is a leader going forward in this field. With regards to area-based management, this is taking into account the local concerns of communities. It's meaning British Columbia can chart its own path independent of what might be happening in other regions of the country, including the East Coast. I am very aware of the fact that salmon move and that it's not just local communities that are affected, but many communities from all across the province have a stake in what happens with our biodiversity and our oceans. But this is going to give us flexibility to take into account those local concerns and make sure those concerns are part of our policy going forward.
Thank you for that. On to the next question. Fabian Dawson from CWest News. When you say transition, are you talking about transition to land or other ocean-based farm sites away from migration pathways?
That's a great question. And part of going into a consultation, particularly a meaningful consultation, is not predetermining the outcomes before you go and have these engagements. So I have already had discussions with proponents who are interested in land-based systems. In my first term as Parliamentary Secretary of Fisheries and Oceans, I had an opportunity to visit some sites for closed containment. But I know that there are other systems that are ocean-based. I know there are hybrid systems. Our primary goal here is to transition away from open net pens towards more sustainable technology. What that technology is and what best fits for British Columbia over the near future is part of what needs to be examined. When I was first asked to look at this by the minister, I made a series of recommendations to her on how that process could roll out and some of the technical work that would have to happen in terms of what state of the art is and what the technology landscape looks like and how the government can play a positive role in this transition. That will also have to be some of the work that will continue going forward.
Okay, next question, Marygriffin with Czech News. Asking what we're announcing as far as the specifics. Are any farms closing? Is there a date for these operations to cease?
Yeah, so thank you for that question as well. I know that everyone on this call is probably very interested on getting a specific date. I do not have a specific date to provide. I can tell you that I approach this file with urgency, as I stated in my remarks. I think it's going to be important to move forward on this transition as quickly as we can in a responsible way. We are seeing ongoing discussions that were initiated by the minister with regards to the Discovery Islands that are directly related to recommendations that were made in the Cohen recommendations, specifically recommendation 19. I spoke to those concerns in the House, and I'm happy to take more questions on that specifically today. But once we get past, and that's a decision that needs to be made with just over a month from now. But I will not be providing any further details on how that's going. I can just say that it's ongoing. We need to chart a path for what happens once we get beyond those decisions in the Discovery Island, and that's part of what I'll be working on.
Okay, Rochelle Baker with the National Observer is asking about Discovery Islands. Specifically, does DFO plan to renew the farm licenses slated to expire in mid-December, sorry? And if so, for how long? And then it's a two-part question. The second part, will you be finished consultations with First Nations December 18th?
Well, thank you for that question. So a little background on my reflections on this. I mean, when I was first appointed parliamentary secretary, and this is way back in 2017, I read the Cohen Commission report from front to back. And as a person who came to the House of Commons to improve the lives and opportunity of future generations, the issue of wild salmon immediately spoke to me as an opportunity to contribute to something that matters to many British Columbians. I spent time with stream keepers, First Nations, fishermen. I visited farm salmon sites, aquaculture sites, finfish aquaculture sites, tried to understand not just the environmental impacts, but the economic impacts as well. My understanding with the Discovery Islands is that those conversations are ongoing. It is my hope that we will meet the timeline that has been specified. Part of meaningful consultation is going into those discussions with an open mind. Part of that discussion, or part of a meaningful consultation, is making sure that we provide the time that is necessary to do those consultations right. So it is my expectation that we will have a decision in December, but I don't want to, again, set myself up for any specific deadlines. There was two parts to that question. Did that answer both parts? Maybe I'd ask the moderator.
Sure. The second part of that was the consultations with First Nations. Will they be finished before December 18th?
It's my expectation, but again, I can't give you a solid answer. I can say with regards to my perspective on consultations, discussions that I've had with the minister, we've talked a lot about UNDRIP, which has already been passed into law in British Columbia and which is forthcoming for the federal government. And part of that process is ensuring that we have meaningful consultations. And part of having meaningful consultations is making sure that we do not have predetermined outcomes and that we allow the time and the resources necessary to meaningfully engage. And that is something that I am particularly dedicated to doing.
A question from Karen Larson with CBC. What is the deadline for completing the transition?
Well, I think I've answered that already.
Yes.
So maybe we can go on to the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question's from Fabian Dawson with CWest News.
Actually, no, just on the CBC question there.
Sure.
I'm certain that there is a need and a desire for everyone on this call to get to a desired endpoint. What I can tell you with certainty is that this is not simply us having a consultation to build a plan. We are beginning the transition now, and we are going to be utilizing resources now. So the process has started and is ongoing, and I want to conduct this process as quickly as possible, as long as we do it the right way.
Okay. Next question, follow up from Fabian Dawson with CWest News. Related to the 9 recent DFO studies show less than a minimal impact from farm sites to migrating wild salmon stocks. The question is, those opposed to all open net salmon farming are saying people should not believe this science of being influenced by the industry. So kind of just looking for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. We have great professional science within the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And of course, this has been a controversial issue where some people, the only solution is to have all the pens out of the water yesterday. And for others, they would hope to see the industry as it is expanded. I think a responsible path is going to have us navigating multiple stakeholders. With regards to what DFO Science has recently said around those 9 risk assessments. So we know that open net pen fish farms affect wild stocks. Much of the debate is around how much the farms affects those stocks and what is an acceptable level of risk. For each of the 9 risk assessments, DFO found that each individual pathogen provided a minimal risk to the abundance and diversity of wild Fraser River sockeye salmon. It was very specific how the assessments were done. Their assessment did not include further analysis on cumulative risk to wild salmon, which could include things like sea lice, climate change, over harvesting. We continue to build on our body of science and on our understanding of the marine environment, which includes how we manage aquaculture. So while there still remains no smoking gun that I can point to today, I can say that our government is committed to a precautionary approach and moving forward with a responsible transition for open net pen finfish aquaculture on the west coast of British Columbia. I should also say that the framework also did not consider the cumulative risks of the 9 pathogens themselves, but rather the risk of them each individually. So we're continuing to invest in science. We're continuing to learn more. There's additional scientific reports coming from DFO and from people outside of DFO and from other countries who are dealing with similar issues. But that doesn't change what's in the mandate letter that was provided by the Prime Minister. And the mandate letter clearly commits our government to transitioning away from open net pen finfish aquaculture, and we will be doing that.
Okay, and while we're kind of along that same line, one last question from Fabian Dawson is around a cumulative assessment. Just, is there going to be a cumulative assessment? So
I don't know exactly what work will continue, which scientific lines will exactly continue. I know, speaking to Jay Parsons, I asked a similar question, one of our scientific reps from DFO, and doing cumulative effect studies are very, from my understanding, and let's put it out there. I'm sure everybody on this call knows this, but just to declare it, I'm not a scientist by any means, so I depend on experts for this information. But my understanding is it is very difficult to do thorough cumulative effects assessments. So whether there will be a future cumulative effect assessment or what the future science will be that will be conducted, I'm uncertain at this time. I'm in no position to answer that. However, Allison is on this call, and she is the Director of Aquaculture Management, and she is based in the Pacific region. So perhaps, Allison, I could ask if you have anything to add to that.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the question. I could just add one thing. It's related to the area-based management too, and perhaps it will give a more tangible understanding related to that. So in terms of cumulative effects, one of the benefits to an area-based management approach is that we will be looking at a number of farms in a given area. And instead of looking at them one by one for any types of regulatory decisions, we would look at them together. And in that way, we would consider the cumulative impacts of all of those farms on that local area that the Parliamentary Secretary spoke of. We would also consider things like specifics of those condition areas for things like timing windows for wild salmon that are migrating, and we could customize the conditions of license for sea lice management to protect those wild stocks, looking at their specific timing versus, a cookie cutter approach across the entire province. So in that way, the area-based management is taking into account the cumulative effects of all farms in a given area and will lead to improved environmental management. Thank you.
Thank you. We did have another question from the Canadian Press from Hina Alam. Can you explain once again what exactly is area-based management? But I think I don't know if there's anything to add on that.
Allison did a fantastic job.
Yes, exactly. So I think we're good there. So that's all the questions I have right now. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the live event Q&A function, which is on the right panel of your screen. And I'll give everyone a moment to add any other questions if they have them.
I'll also take this opportunity to remind everyone on the line that if there are any follow-up questions, we'd be happy to take them. And I believe there's been a mechanism provided to do that. So we don't have to get necessarily every single question on this call.
Absolutely, yes. The media advisory included the email address to the Pacific Region media mailbox. So please, any questions that are not answered today, you can send them to us and we will action it from there. I do see an additional question here from Rochelle Baker with the National Observer. Just asking about the DFO plan to renew the Discovery Island salmon farm licenses in December. I think that's been covered, but just wanted to, offer that up one more time.
Well, thank you for the question. I think I've thoroughly answered that previously, but if I'm not sure if you were here at the start of the call, after reviewing the video, if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us and we can follow up with any further details that are missing.
All right, we'll see if there's any additional questions coming through. I don't see any other questions coming in at this time. PS Beech, would you like to have any closing remarks?
Certainly. Well, first of all, thank you, Allison, for being a part of this call, and thank you to the moderator and all the staff behind the scenes that make this possible. Thank you to everybody in DFO that has been working diligently on this file. And I think I would regret if I didn't take the opportunity to thank the many people that have been working on this issue from all kinds of different perspectives in British Columbia. Whether you're part of an environmental organization, or if you're part of the industry, or if you work in the industry, or if you're an affected First Nation, or with the provincial government, or affected municipal governments, we have been having fantastic conversations. It's going to be a difficult process to find a reasonable path forward, but we're only going to be able to do that all working together. And just in the conversations that I've had over the last number of months with these individuals, with stakeholders, within the department, and of course with the minister, I am quite optimistic that we will be able to find a sustainable path that will bring economic growth and opportunity to British Columbians. It's going to take some work to get there, but we are up to that task, and I am excited to get going.
Great, thank you for that. This concludes the virtual event today. As a reminder, if you have any questions, they can be directed to Media Relations using the contact information on the media advisory. Thank you everyone for attending today.